I've never been scrolling through Instagram and been like, holy, that's the exact same board I have. So the thumbnail says that this is the most creative pedal board ever. And all I'm picturing it is everybody at home who clicked on this video, like when Buddy the elf went to New York to see his dad and found the world's best cup of coffee. The idea behind the thumbnail is that everyone's board is just unique and creative. Every board ever made. Statistically, the chances of anybody else having the same board as you is basically nothing. It doesn't exist. I'm picturing the bass guy with the Sans amp, like, man, I've seen tons of guys using the exact same rig as me. Like, I've never been scrolling through Instagram and been like, holy, that's the exact same board I have. The uniqueness of the pedal board is in you as the player. You know, even if you don't make sound, the pedal board doesn't make sound. So I just want to encourage that every board out there is amazing, it's creative, it's unique, and that the creativity is actually in you as the player. I'm gonna have all the timestamps at the bottom again, so feel free to jump around, watch the video, take it in however you'd like. Hi, my name's Jack Soul. Welcome to this pedal board walkthrough. So I'm running through my Squier Jazzmaster with a gold TV Jones Filtertron in the neck, which is where we'll be hanging out, and it's going through my Fender Supersonic amp, and here's the clean tone. And then here is my overdriven tone. Alright, it's got a good sound to it. And here's my second stage overdrive if I want to get to that next level. Alright, I love the Kernom. There's so much good stuff in there. But we're going to walk through the pedal board in order, and the first pedal is actually the Enzo. I just showed the Kernom first because that stays on the entire time. But let's hit the Enzo. So essentially, how I use this is in dry mode, which is none of the synthesizer engine. So you're hearing my guitar dry tone right through my Enzo, which is filtering, and it sounds like this. So it's cutting the note off at a certain point, and I think it sounds awesome. It sounds super pleasant. It has modulation that you can turn on. I'm going to keep that off. You can make it longer and shorter where it cuts it off. I'm just going to keep it right there. I think that that's sounding really good. And all through this walkthrough, I'm going to be turning on different pedals just to show you kind of how I use it in what context. So I love using this one with the Thermae, and I'll put it on one of my custom settings here. And it just kind of runs away with it in the background. And if we put a reverb on with that. That's got just a really interesting sound that you could put on in the background of a song. What I actually do, I like using it with just reverb too, and it really showcases the reverb, but in a really and the Enzo, but in a really interesting way. They combine for this sound. I think that sounds really neat. And of course the Enzo, there's tons of different sounds that you can get out of it, but that's kind of what I'm using right now. Eventide, I have set up for a few things, and I'll run through them really quick, but they're kind of my standard modulation. I gotta turn off the Enzo here. So, vibrato. A slow rate chorus. I really like the way that sounds. And you can't go without a Filtertron. And then the last one that I actually use is a synthesizer engine on the H9, and I think it sounds really cool. Oh, sorry. This is the bass setting that I use for looping. I think that sounds really cool, and here is the synthesizer sound. So I like some of the synthesizer engines on the H9. I think they sound really good. The tracking isn't perfect on it, but I think the Enzo is a little better, but it's not perfect either. But the Enzo, you can just get so creative with it. Where else I had a Boss SY200, and the tracking on that pedal was perfect. It was just a joy to play with. The reason why I ended up getting rid of it and going with the Enzo is because the sounds weren't very customizable, and it wasn't the direction that I wanted to be going with my synthesizer sound. So the tracking was just so good. I really missed that, but I'm glad that I switched to the Enzo for the tweakability on the settings. But that moves us up to the Thermae. So I use it just for a really lush delay. I have a really long delay on this side. And you heard my setting on this side. great pedal, super fun to play around with, which brings us to the Microcosm. So what I usually do with it is I set it in the haze setting. This is my user preset because I've tweaked it a bit, but it's essentially the haze in the granules setting. And what I do is I'll strum a chord. I'll hit the sustain. And this is what I use to just set something to play over. So there's the pad. Put on some reverb. I really love doing that. Sometimes I'll put it through the Generationloss, and then I'll just record a loop on the Blooper. I really like that sound. And that's just so that I can freeze the Blooper into that sound, the Generationloss into that sound, and then I can play without the Generationloss. Because the Blooper, again, doesn't affect your tone. So, yeah, and then I have two other presets that I've been really loving. One's a warp. Just does some really great stuff in the background. Some really neat artifacts there. My glide setting is just very similar. I like to have it on in the background. Oh, it just sounds so good. And then finally, my last preset that I'm going to talk about is just to show that the Microcosm can do some really generic stuff, and it's can be one of those pedals that's super useful for the basics on your pedal board. So I just have it set up as a basic delay. I really appreciate that about the Microcosm. The Generationloss is that VHS sound. And I have my preset 1 on classic mode. So these pedals, you can go to classic mode, which is the version 1. And it sounds so good too. And the classic mode has freeze, which is really cool. There's a few pedals on the board that do freeze, but I think the Generationloss actually sounds really dynamic in freeze mode. Love using that pedal, and which takes us down to the LBX. There's some great experimental settings on the LBX, like cassette Pong. Just kind of picks up where the Thermae left off. My favorite setting so far has to be the Octaswell. I love using it in a mix. So musical. And the LBX has so much, it'd be impossible to tackle it in this short video. But the next pedal we're going to look at in the chain is the Specular Tempus. So the Specular Tempus, I have two settings set up that I use a lot, which the first one, I try and stay true to what my guitar tone sounds like. It's just again, a reverb that reflects what you already sound like. And again, that just sounds really clear and authentic. Where else? I have a setting queued up called the Vortex. And it takes your tone and it does a lot with it, but I like what it does. Just feel this sway to it. Sounds so good. And you've been hearing the Blooper all along, but it's just a ton of fun to play around with. So let's put on some. I'll put a loop, cue it up, leave some space there, and start over there. So the MS3 is set up MIDI for the Kernom, Enzo, Thermae, Microcosm, LBX, and Blooper. And just for example, I kind of just use MIDI for whatever I'm, feeling creatively, set up combinations and whatnot. But here's, just for example, I have this set up for the Blooper. So the Blooper is set up on, so I start it with the trigger on the Blooper, and then I have play set up on number 3, I have record set up on number 2, and I have undo set up on number 4, which undo isn't as easy to navigate without setting up MIDI. So I find that really fun to play around with. So I have a space for the Blooper set in. Let's put something into it. So I'll press record here. I can press play. Now that we got something going on, we can use some modifiers. Put a high pass filter on it. The blooper is a ton of fun to play around with. My favorite part about it, though, it's at the end of the chain, is that anywhere that I have my board, I can create a loop, and using MIDI, I can save that loop to any of the presets on the blooper. And then I can use my laptop later on and go in and get each individual loop off just by downloading it onto my computer. And I think that is just an incredible thing to have when you're coming up with an idea. And if you have multiple layers to the loop, you can download each individual layer as well, so you can put it into your DAW and edit it, use it to start your idea on your recording, all of that. And it's just a phenomenal idea to have. But anyway, that concludes the pedalboard rundown. These pedals all have so much going on. It's impossible to get to it all in one video, but thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to be making these videos. So if you liked it, go on ahead and drop a like. If you have any suggestions for future videos, drop that. And if you think that this might be the most creative pedalboard ever made, go ahead and share your thoughts on that. Again, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.